Torah tells us in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 24, I'm just reading the translation word by word. כי ייקח איש אישה ובעלה. If a man marries a woman and live with her, and then the next step, if it will be something happens, she not find favor in his eyes, so or it's a matter of immorality, so he needs to write her a bill of divorce, a get. But then the Torah said, the next step, again, chapter 24, book of Deuteronomy, verse 2. She left his house and went and married another man. Unfortunately, the second one is a problem, and the Torah used a strong word. They said, and the later man hated her and wrote her a bill of divorce and presented it into her hand and sent her from his house. And the later man who married her to himself wants to have her back. Torah said that's a Torah prohibition. They said her first husband who divorced her shall not again take her to become his wife after she had been defiled, for it is an abomination before Hashem. You shall not bring sin upon the land of Hashem. Your God gives you as an inheritance. So what we see in this line in the Torah, obviously, if she marries second husband, like even in the federal law, we know that the alimony treatment applies in a certain period of time as long as she is divorcee. The moment she marries someone else, she lost an alimony. Now, the question is, the first subject we're going to discuss is a situation that women who divorced but only engaged, meaning betrothed to someone else, they're not married yet, and the second one give her a bill of divorce, a get, after they engaged, they broke up in a modern language, can she go back to the first husband? Especially if it was not a manner of cohabitation between the two. The another subject we're going to talk is the idea of takanat ketubah. As we know, as a part of Jewish marriage is to have a marriage contract between the two partners. Many people over the years I found they have no clue what's involved. The idea who signed, what's signing, what's involved with the ketubah itself, with the marriage contract, and who basically commit himself and how. Again, we're not going to touch the whole subject, but part of that, the idea of takanat ketubah. Another thing is we're going to talk about the law of inheritance, especially in a case of engagement close to marriage, meaning if either from the man's side or the woman's side, if they engaged and they're about to get married and one party passed, what exactly the law of inheritance, if it's applied and how it applies to the two parties. The last one, God willing, if times allow, we're going to discuss the issue of truma, meaning there is a special contribution that one needs to bring to the temple. In ancient time, we know, I assume that everyone remember that story at the beginning of the book of Genesis. The Torah tells us the story of Cain and Abel. Everyone knows. I think billions of people know this story. But the key point was Abel gave God the best, Cain gave leftover. The question is, what happened if someone made a decision to combine the two? Meaning, he's bringing a contribution, but the contribution, let's say, just for simple language, you take a jar full of tomatoes and you put the nice one on the top and all the rotten one on the back. Can we accept such a contribution, or if that contribution basically fulfill an obligation? Because as we know by biblical terms, for certain action, a person needs to atone by giving a atonement of contribution. The question is, if it's a combination of something that it's ra and yafeh, something that it's not so good or rotten or bad, with something good, how you treat it. Trace the situation, just simply speaking, you take a watermelon, you pick it, you give it. You give it to a poor person, you give it to someone. It turned to be a rotten, right? What do you have to do? Do you have to replace it? If you give something, a contribution to yeshiva, to synagogue, to hospital, and it turned to be something that it's not good or not so good. Since you commit yourself to something, what exactly the law? So where we are on page 88 and close to the bottom of the page, 88b. 88b, 7 lines from the bottom of the page. Okay. צריכה גט מזה ומזה. Here the Mishnah speaks about a scenario, very painful scenario. A couple live together, that's something we discussed yesterday. Simple scenario, there's a conflict between the two and he left. Or can be a simple situation, he left to Afghanistan, to Desert Storm, to Panama, to all kind of places, and nobody knows where is he. Someone came, can be men, can be women, just one individual, not necessarily Jewish, and said, I saw him dead. And as a result of that, she went ahead and she married another man. And then all of a sudden, the first husband came back. So the Mishnah tells us that she needs to receive a divorce bill, get, from both, from number one, the original husband, and from the second one. The Gemara wants to understand what's the mindset, why we say that she needs a get from both. Obvious question is, Bishlama merishon tibay get. Obviously, from the first husband, we understand why she needs get. Why? Because she's really married to him. They are a married couple. So therefore, we understand she needs a get from him. Ela misheini amai. Why from the second one? Since it was not in a way legitimate marriage. And that's a question. What do you mean it's not legitimate marriage? One person came. We said it's fine. She can go ahead and marry. She married. Why you don't call it a legitimate? So that's basically a knas rabbanan. This is a special fine that the rabbis came in and said that she must have a get from the second one. But the question is why? Znut be'almahu. She is a married woman. And since she's a married woman, she marries someone. It's like an act of, how do you say it, promiscuous, like harless. It's not a matter of a legitimate marriage. Amar Rav Huna explained to us, and he said the reason she needs a get from the second husband, gzeira. This is a rabbinic decree. They said, Shema Yomru. People, I'm sorry for this language, but people are stupid, okay? And people outside start thinking. Remember we talked about it yesterday? Shema Yomru geiresh ze v'nasa ze nimtzet eshet ish yotzah b'lo get. People will say, okay, look what's happened. She married, and the husband disappeared. Guess what happened? The husband most probably gave her a get when he left to Antarctica, to Afghanistan, to Panama, whatever it is, right? He left, he gave her a get. Now, she married this man, and all of a sudden, we don't ask him, the second one, to give her a get, so guess what people think? You know what? Maybe, you don't need a get. You don't, it's marriage, it's not marriage. People will mix up all the concept of receiving get, getting get, marriage concept, the commitment between the two parties. They don't conceptualize the whole story properly. As we all know, especially in the revelation of the media, you go around the table, you tell something to one person, it comes back a very different version. And when people see something like that, we carry for her reputation, and we carry for other people's reputation, and we want to do things the way that it should be done. So therefore, because people are thinking, we saw her married, quote unquote, to this second man, they don't conceptualize that marriage was not legitimate or whatever it is, right? So we said, wait a second, guess what? Biblically speaking, you're right. She needs a get from the first husband. Rabbinically speaking, we impose upon that situation, upon her to receive a get from the second husband as well. Even you maybe challenge the whole concept of being a husband or being a couple, a married couple. So, if we really...
So, this is then, it's based on the ruling essentially that once, if she's an adulteress, she's forbidden both to her husband and to the adulterer.
That's what
Correct.
we said yesterday.
Right, so it's based on that.
Yes,
so that's
but
why
the notion of Rav Huna...
But I understand, so people will understand it, that it's a... Right.
Because remember, when usually you said, who cares what people think?
Right.
But this manner of society, especially when you talk about Jewish community, it's sometimes segregate community or sometimes a caring community. We care for people's reputation. We care for what people think and what people want. We want to have a bright future for all these people, right? So we want to make sure that the whole situation, everyone will be protected properly, right?
Right.
So now we challenge that view, and we said the whole reason you require a get from the second one, it's because people claim that the second marriage was not legitimate. Seifa dektane, we, God willing, going to learn on page 92b. Here is the story. Amrula, one single witness came to her and said, Met baalech, your husband passed, he's dead, he's no longer among the living. V'nitkadsha, nitkadsha meaning she engaged, she wasn't married yet, she engaged to someone else. Ve'achar kach ba baala, and all of a sudden the husband is back. What they said, muteret lachazor lo, which means she allowed to go back to him. What does that mean? Biblically speaking, it's not so simple. The Torah tells us the moment you have a betrothal agreement, engagement agreement, it's a commitment. Yes, it's not yet a matter of cohabitation. It's not a matter yet of being together in the same house, okay? But since it is an agreement between two parties, agreement of commitment, we take it very seriously. So meaning, listen carefully, the Torah requires at that stage for breaking up with get. You will follow me? Breaking up after engagement require get. Even nothing physically happened between the two parties. All right? So here is a situation. The husband disappeared. One witness said that he's dead. She went ahead and betrothed to someone else. She not have any physical matter with him. Yet we said she can go back to her first husband. Hatam name neima. Why are we saying that she can go back to the first husband? You may think that people mistakenly thinking what? Geiresh ze vekidesh ze. People are stupid. So what they said, no, the guy that left for Panama, he already gave her a get. And the second guy came in and he gave her, engaged with her. So how you require, so you should say the same thing. Eshet ish yotza belo get. Guess what people said? Oh, look what happened. A married woman can get out of her marriage without get. So, according to the view of Rav Huna, we basically required a get also from a person that only betrothed her before she returned to the first husband. Even the whole manner of betrothed was never in real effect, because the reality, as we said, it's all mistake. It's all mistake because she is still a married woman. So for sure there is Tosfot and other Marsha said the whole question is tfisat kiddushin. Tfisat kiddushin meaning halot, that the contract, the agreement is binding. And it says that it's binding. It's not binding contract. She's eshet ish. She's married woman. She's not arusalo. She's not engaged with him. So the Gemara responded and said, "Le'olam ba'aya get." So you see, now we have a clear understanding why we require even from the second husband that you may use the word fake marriage, right? She required get before she returned to the first one. Even in that circumstance that nothing happened between the two, they only make a betrothed, engaged commitment, and even it wasn't mentioned in the Mishnah. So the Gemara challenged that and said, Ihache, if she needs a get also from the second man, that he betrothed her before the first husband returned, Nimtza, again, if you look at people, what people said, people mistakenly said, Ze machzir gushato mishenit arsa, which means that here is a situation. Remember we read from Deuteronomy 24? Here you see a situation that the person have the first husband return, have back his wife, so even you require her to have a get from the second husband, people still thinking that, guess what happened? He left, he gave her a get. Then the second one betrothed her. And then the second one betrothed and it was in effect. And then now we ask the second one to give her a get, we'll cover up for him, right? And then now all of a sudden she can come back to the first husband even he divorced her, you know? And that's a issue of a biblical term. So I explain in my book on Rashi. Rashi said, כלומר, עתה למימר דמותר להחזיר גרושתו מי שנתארסה. דסברי גירש זה וקידש זה וחזר וגירש וחזרה לראשון. So the book called Aruch Laner, and I think he matched this question in Rashi. It's the core issue here is you have a rabbinic gzeira, rabbinic decree, and you have ikar adin, you have the essence of the law. And here the question is, what do you care for? Do you care what's the law, or you care for what's rabbinic decree for what people will say? You can read more in my book. Anyway, so the Gemara responded and said, Ki Rabbi Yossi ben Kippar. Listen to his view, it's fascinating. Listen what he said. He said, the Amar, this is something we learn on page 11, Mina nisu'in arsura, mina erusin muteret. Okay. Reuven, the first husband, married Tamar, they are couple. Okay? Now Reuven disappeared. Tamar get the witness that said he's dead. She went ahead and she engaged to Shimon. Now think about it. Engagement again and again, it is and it is not commitment. It is a commitment in a sense of sincere intent, some letter of intent, a seriousness, like letter of credit, but it's not any cohabitation, it's not the final stage of marriage. So Rabbi Yossi ben Kippar said, if she married Mr. B, Mr. Shimon, then it's a different story. Married is married, she cannot return to the first husband, even, listen carefully, even they married and nothing happened between them and he passed. The moment they married, it's marriage. However, he said, if she engaged and she's not yet married to him, and either he passed or he divorced her, as we said, that's a different story. She can go back to her husband. So the Gemara said, Ham b'dekatane seifa af al pi dain shenatan la acharon get. So Rashi tells us afilu reach get posel lekeuna, which means the second husband gave her a get lo psala min hakeuna. So even she's divorced, even from the stage of betrothal, she is now prohibited to marry a kohen. So she, in a sense, the situation is different because it's called reach get.
It's only Yerusim.
All right. Michlal de lo baya get. What does that mean? He just gave her a little piece of paper. It's not really, I mean, they engaged, but what do you mean by giving a get, right? Even by rabbinic term. It's just a little paper. The ibaya get.
Kind of like the get after Ma'amar, right? That would,
I mean,
because you haven't did, all you've done is,
Amai lo psala min hakeuna. Think about it. As the Torah instructed us, a divorced woman cannot marry a kohen.
Right.
Now you tell me that she can marry a Kohen.
But she's not in the same status as a regular divorce.
Right. So it's just a little piece of paper.
Yeah.
So אל הסיפא אמרי קידושי טעות הבו. That it's all mistaken. So again, people are people, and people are thinking that this manner of betrothed made in a certain condition, and that condition didn't have an effect, which means, for example, someone said to a woman, I'm betrothing you, you will become my wife, if I'm a Kohen. Right? And then Rashi explains, they search and turn to be that he's not. So what is this? They said this condition hatnai lo kayam, that the condition is not in effect. So the whole chalot erusin, all the idea of the engagement is not in effect. As therefore anashim tolim lekula, people will lenient. So reisha namei amrei nisuei ta'ut havu. So the marriage for the second man, it's a mistaken. So you may think that people mesangerim, people will be more sympathetic, more in a sense defended, and they said that it was a mistaken, all mistake. So therefore the Gemara said, Knasu harabanan. The rabbis came in and said, wait a second, we want to put the boundaries. We want to make sure that no one ever think that a married woman could get out without get. That married woman can have anything to do outside the framework of marriage. So therefore, even in this circumstance, we require a get. Okay? So the Gemara challenged that. It said, Seifa name liknesua. So we may need also in the last clause of the Mishnah that she needs a get from the second one. So they said, Reisha de avda isura knasua. Seifa de lo avda isura lo knasua rabanan. They said, wait. In the first clause, the situation is that she married intentionally to the second one, so you are more stringent. Because here, people will think that a married woman can get out of the marriage without get. But the last clause, that she's only betrothed to him, but not married him, so you can go lenient. You can say that you're not concerned, and therefore she doesn't need a get. Next one is very important. Listen carefully, the next stage. Ein la ktuba. Okay, ktuba. Ktuba, what does that mean?
In this case,
you
talking
have
about the claims on the ketubah. They're talking about specifically.
Ktuba is a document.
Right.
You have the date, you have location, you have the time, you have commitments, etc., etc. Written commitments.
Right.
The husband commit himself to shelter, to take care of all of her needs, etc., etc. Now, second husband, she will never receive anything that was written in Ketubah because it wasn't legitimate.
Right.
So they said, so let's talk at the first place. What's the purpose of Ketubah? Why the sages required, in order to make an effective marriage, to have a Ketubah agreement, Ketubah license, Ketubah document between the two parties? Listen, because that's applied to all of our study in the future. Excuse me, that's Gemara in Tractate Yevamot, page 11b. כדי שלא תהא קלה בעיניו להוציאה. She will not be demeaned in his eyes, in such he will be easily divorce her. How? She make him mad. You wake up in the morning and he said it's over, right? So we want to make sure that, you know the story about the Achashverosh, right, with Vashti. So some say that then when he is sober, he realized that he
regretted it.
Right, regretted. We want to make sure that he knows what he's doing, right? So the moment
that's why we don't accept just a declaration that he's divorced. I mean, he's got to go through a process.
Unlike
right?
Islam, right?
Right.
But so the whole idea is that if it costs a lot of money to go to divorce, a person will reconsider. He will think twice, 3 times, 5 times, 20 times before he's rushing to divorce. Look at our society. It's a high percentage of divorce. So we want a person to think about it, because sometimes it's justified, but many times people just get angry over something and then they come down, or then they learn to live together somehow, and you know. So tehe kala be'enav leotzi'ah. But here we go just the opposite way.
Right.
Since we want them to get divorced, we want them, and this guy figure out, the second guy, what do you think? Says, I rather live with her in a sin instead of paying so much money. Right?
Right.
So therefore the sages come in and says, forget it. Right? And the idea is, they put a knas, they put a fine, that the whole chalot of ketubah, the whole effect of ketubah is total annulled, it's total abrogated, it's total expunged, it's not in effect. אין לה פירות ולא מזונות ולא בלעות.
I mean, I guess isn't that by definition though? With the second ketubah is invalid. I mean, because the other one was not. Deeper. She wasn't a widow.
Dave, we want to go deeper, and the deeper idea is we go to the mindset of the man, what exactly he is thinking, because now he's in a big turmoil, right? He's torn.
Right. No, I mean, I understand he has to give the get. I mean, he doesn't have.
But what his mindset right. When he wrote the ketubah. Mm-hmm. We assume that he was sincere.
No, absolutely, yeah. The mindset was that she was truly a widow, and that this was a legitimate marriage on both parts. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what makes it so difficult, is because it could be good intentions on all parties, and you can have horrendous results as a result. With everyone doing it with the best of intentions. It's it's very difficult.
I want to repeat my declaration from yesterday to everyone here and everyone who watch us. That we don't practicing halachot yet. We just me'orerim. We just speaking about the subjects, and someone with those issues will go to a prominent posek, prominent rabbi. En la perot velo mezonot velo blaot. So we said that unfortunately she lost all of her right over claims, etc., fruits, sustenance, etc., clothing from both, from the first and the second. So they said here, Tnai Ketubah, Ki Ketubah Dami. When you have the Ketubah, you have a very clear language in the Ketubah that it's specified, it's spell out the commitment the husband has, or soon to be husband, to his bride, to his upcoming wife. There is a part that is an amendment or an addition to the ketubah itself, because in the structure of ketubah we have maneh, matayim, betula, almana. We have a very clear structure in the ketubah itself. But there is another additional part which we learn, nichsei milog, perot, all kind of tna'ei ketubah, and extra conditions. So those extra conditions, v'yavin alechi, what is written, and sometimes we add certain part. One time when I was a kid, I went with my dad. My dad, those years, sometimes have 2 or even 3 weddings at night. So one time we have a guy from Georgia, Kruzini, was those people from East Russia, very hot temper. So he said $1 million, and my father sat with him for a long time and tried to say to him, calm down, we know that you love her and everything, but you don't have $1 million, especially in those days. $1 million, I never forget, I was a kid. Anyway, so there is a lot of additional thing that people can write as an amendment.
Was there any thought of forcing an amendment in the second ketubah that basically, a disclaimer saying that if the other husband comes back, this ketubah.
How you do that?
Yeah, okay.
So they said natla mizeh mizeh.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's let's put it in reality. The moment that the bedding go by the one witness, for example,
right?
Imagine that she's so broken-hearted, lonely for 10, 20, 40 years.
I understand.
They go to that notion anyway. Natla mizeh mizeh.
You kind of compare it to secular law, and I guess in secular law, if the person after a period of time, if the courts declare him dead, then even if he comes back, the
now,
marriage
my friend,
was over, and so
now you see, my friend, the difference between
in the secular
Jewish law and the secular
No,
law.
I understand. It's the difference. It's just
difference.
it's interesting that.
Natla mizeh umizeh, if she receives something from both or one, she need to return that. So pshita, if she's not deserved, she should
No
take
claim,
it.
right.
Ma'u detema kevan detafsa lo mapkina minei kamash melan. You may think because she's already have it, so leave it alone. They said no. Now, havalad mamzer, this is very painful. They said that the child that was born from that illegitimate marriage, so it's considered illegitimate, mamzer. Now the question is, why the baby that was born from the first husband, after he returned, is considering mamzer, why in reality she's still his wife? There is a concept which we're going to discuss later in the 2 pages further on, from page 89b and onward. We have a biblical law, we have rabbinic, and there are cases that rabbinic law override biblical law. Soon you see when they can, in a sense, uprooted a biblical law by the sages, by the rabbinic law. Nan hatam. Now bring a source from Mishnah, Tractate Yevamot, chapter 2, Mishnah number 2. Ein tormin min hatameh ala tahor. The Mishnah said one may not separate truma from ritually impure produce in order to exempt ritual pure food. Ve'im taram, and if he separate truma from impure food unwittingly, unintentionally, beshogeg, trumato truma, bemezid lo asa velo klum. So here is the concept that you have a mixture. Remember we talked in the introduction about Cain and Abel. You have a produce that it's not in a good quality. Mm-hmm. You have another produce that it's in a good quality. Someone gave a contribution, but it was not intentional. And he mixed something that is rotten with something that is good. So he said, if it was a mistake, we accepting that. If it was intentional, then it's nothing. Rashi explained to us that the Kohen can derive benefit, because remember, the Kohanim, the way that it's set it up, each tribe have its own property. The people who are serve us, the Kohanim who live in Jerusalem, right? They are the people who accepted and live by our contributions. They deserve to have the joy, the benefit of our good contribution. When we give them a rotten product, I gave one example. One time when I was a rabbi in New Jersey, we used to have a gmach, a special clothing that we used to collect from people and give it to poor people. So it turns sometimes people give a worn out clothing. So what we try to say is this: if you have a clothing that is in a good condition, you spend a few dollars and you go to a dry cleaner, make it look neat and nice, then take out the stickers, bring it nice with the wrap up with a plastic, and then we can give it to someone else. But if you give some bad odor, smell, rotten clothing, it's an insult to the poor people. Mm-hmm. It's just wrong. Okay? Mm-hmm. So here, the idea is, if it's intentional, the rabbi said it's nothing. But if you mixture the rotten with the good, by force of circumstance, we accept that as a contribution, even it. So they said, "Mai lo asa velo klum." Why you don't say en trumato truma? That's not considering a truma. Amar Rav Chizda, lo asa velo klum kol ikar. Da afilu ahi gvira. Gvira is midat nefach. It's like a hevel nachala. It's hadar letivlei. So it means we have two entities. We have untied product that is called tevel, and we explain many times that Rabbanan, the sages, put a takana. Rashi said, since biblically speaking, they have halot truma, it's have some effect. The rabbis came in and said, we would like him to reconsider the whole action. You know why? There's a reason for that. רב נתן בר אבושה אמר, לא עשה ולא כלום לתקן את השיריים, אבל תרומה הווה. Which means that the Rav Natan Bar Oshaya said, okay, guess what? He has done nothing with regard to preparing the remaining produce for which he is separate truma, but the fruit that he separated itself is considering a contribution, a truma, although the portion is set aside, is sanctified as truma, does not exempt him from separating more truma from ritually pure produce. Why is that? So there is a reason. We now elaborate on each and every opinion because we need to understand why why the sages say that you cannot eat the dust shirayim. Rav Chizda lo amar ki Rav Natan bar Rabbi Yoshea di amarta ve'truma zimni de pasha ve'lo mafrish. So Rashi explained to us, and he said, I'm just reading first the Rashi and then we're going to explain it. Dilma pasha ולא הדר מפריש מן הטהור ולכמן פריך כיוון דמדאורייתא תרומה הוא איד מלקטנה משדולג תרומתו תרומה היכם מפקינן למקדושתה דילמה פשע. This is the mindset. The rabbis are so smart. They get to the mindset of people. When a person knows that he deserves death, if you do some sin, the Torah said you deserve death penalty. For example, tevel. Excuse me, eating untied product. Person stay away from that. He's afraid. If he knows that these rabbinic stringencies, he have the intent to belittle it, to take it not seriously. So if he mix a good and a rotten together, you figure out that's a rabbinic idea that he should give a nice produce, but by the Torah law it's fine, then people just belittle that. So the rabbis came in and said, guess what? We want the person to know that he is a total wrong sinner, etc. And therefore we said we cannot accept that, because if you treat it otherwise, people will conceptualize the idea of truma in contribution in the wrong way. And because they have chashash pshia, that people do that intentionally, and as long as you not threaten them that they have the stringency of Torah laws, therefore the rabbi said that the original truma doesn't have an effect, and therefore he needs to go back and contribute it from those ritually pure produce. So the Gemara asks a question. Ma'ishna mehadetna. This is a fascinating Mishnah. Tractate Yevamot, chapter 3, the first Mishnah. Hatorem kishot venimtzet mara. One who take a melon, and Rashi said beshogeg, unintentional, turned to be a bitter one. Avatiach, like watermelon, and turned to be venimtzet saruach, turned to be bitter. So they said truma v'yachzor v'yitrom. Again, it's unwittingly, unintentionally, right? So it's a contribution, but guess what? Tosfot explained to us that the sages come in and said you have to go back and give another contribution because it's not befitting, right? So why Rav Chizda said lo asa velo klum? So they said shogeg amezid karamit, shogeg lo avad isura, mezid ka avad isura. How do you compare it? Because there is a difference between intentional and unintentional. The unintentional did not commit a sin and consequently does not deserve to be penalized, versus the intentional sinner did commit a sin. So there is a very big discussion, not only in the Tosfot and Rashba and Ritva, but many other Rishonim, what exactly the idea of the sages requiring the person to go back and give second time a contribution. So basically the rabbis do not want leafkia din doraita, to uprooted a biblical law, because the Torah said it's a contribution. But if it's intentional, we are concerned. But here it's the question of intentional, not intentional. If he did it intentional, that's a pshia. He did it. We have no other choice. So, but if the rabbis came in and said, if you don't say hadar letivlei, he comes back to the idea of violation of untied product of biblical law. A person is like, when it's come to biblical law that said that a person deserves a death penalty, that scares people, right? If it's just rabbinic stringencies, people belittle that. That's the core view of many Rishonim. So therefore, that's the idea. Rashi said, "V'nimtzet," that is shogeg. V'rami shogeg ha-shogeg. Ha-chatani katani b'shogeg trumato truma. Hatam ktane truma v'yachzor v'yitrom. So you see the opposite. Hatam shogeg karov lemezid. Dibayle lemit amei. So he need to taste it first. Meaning, imagine this guy bringing just in a example watermelon or other produce, right? Taste it. See if it's befitting. Why? Because otherwise it's karov lemezid. It's almost like intentional. Tosfot tells us here, klomar yafrish al ma shehu minei uvei kedei shitom vetulo. You take a watermelon. Guess what? You take a little slice of the watermelon, taste it. You bring a jar of different food, taste one, right? Mm-hmm. So you taste it, you know it's good, you give it, right? Mm-hmm. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
ורמי מזיד המזיד, אך הקטן במזיד ולא עשה כלום. התנתנן, התורם משאין נקוב. על נקוב תרומה ויחזור ויתרום. The Mishnah tells us in Tractate Yevamot, chapter 5, Mishnah number 10. They said, if someone gives a contribution, and he gives a contribution from a produce growing in a vessel that is not perforated, for meaning you have fruits that come out of this atzitz, this jar that have, usually they have a perforated or not. Yeah. Sometimes the perforated, it's given a space. So the not nakuv, I use the word en nakuv because it's easy for me to say it. En nakuv, it's only rabbinic. Nakuv, if it's have a hole perforated, it's a biblical obligation to give a truma. So the said is truma v'yachzor v'yitrom. So basically, a non-nakuv, if it doesn't have the hole, is exempt. If you have all, you have to. So therefore, he needs to bring back that, give the contribution again. So we are not concerned that he is doing it intentionally, and therefore he is not going to do that contribution. So this ruling is based on the principle that anything that grew in a pot without a hole does not require separation of truma by Torah law. In this case, the fact is that he must again set aside truma. It does not mean that the portion he separated is not considered at all. So the Gemara responded and said, "Betrei mane tzayet, bechad mana la tzayet." So I explain in my book on Rashi. Rashi said here, "Klomar hatam kevan de mitrei mane, ki amart lehadar trom meidach tzayet lach." So here, basically, I elaborate a lot on this Rashi. The idea is, it's again based on the Ritva and others. The idea is how you treated people in a sense of accepting, and also Tosfot said, if you have the two separate vessels, one is atzitz nakuv, one have the hole, one doesn't have the hole. So we believe that the person listened to us when is the two vessels. Since the difference between the two vessels is clear in the eye, if the owner is told he must separate truma again, it can be assumed that he will comply, that he will agree, right? Because the reality, as we said earlier, people when they hear sages and they hear Torah, they treat it unfortunately in two different ways, which is wrong. But that's the mindset of some people, right? If I don't understand it logically, and the rabbi makes those rules, forget it, right? So we want to make sure that it's right. Bechad mana lo tzayit. The fruits that grow in one vessel, people will not listen. So it's ritually impure, and pure produce look the same in his eyes. So as a result, if he is informed that he must set aside the truma the second time, despite the fact that the product is already set aside, he has the status of truma. He will doesn't take care of that. He will not do it. In a way, it's remind me when we renovated the school. So we have the money that's set aside for a long time from our sweet sisterhood, and we went to this notion. Some people here will tell you that those schools wing need renovation. It was whatever 50 years old. They need to. So it was one lady. One lady came to the room. The room was rotten, right? It's good, in a good condition. Why children cannot use this room and can study this room? It's already voted, it's already dedicated. It was just a question of contractor and fixing things. She's still thinking it still can be usable. They don't talk about the mold issue, the fungus issue, the children's issues, the liability issues. There are people like that. So again, if you leave it to the mindset, I'm just using this as an example, right? Mindset of people make their own judgment. Oh, the rabbi said it, who cares? You know, show me in the Torah, you know. So that's the story. Rav Natan bar Rabbi Yoshaya de'amar lo asa velo klum. But according to Rav Natan, son of Yoshaya, who said that he is nothing in regard to preparing the remaining produce, letaken shiraim aval truma ave. But it's still, nevertheless, considering a truma, and Kohen can use them to lit right away. That's the way Rashi says, because according to Rav Natan bar Yoshaya, he holds that even he did it intentional. He used a ritually impure produce, and the idea of that produce effect, since the Mishnah did not designate it clearly when the Kohen allowed to use them, it means that he can use them immediately without putting a truma and a maaser right away. Now we bring a quote from the Tractate Yevamot, chapter 5, Mishnah number 10. Minan akuv al she'ein akuv trumato truma. Here is a situation that the fellow give a donation. He separates truma from that which is grew in the perforated part. Again, there is a hole on the very bottom. From that which is a form a non-perforated part, his truma is truma. So again, it's only rabbinic. It's growing as something that is perforated, which is a biblical, but he combined the two. So they said, in one hand you give it to a Kohen, ולא תאכל עד שיוציא עליה תרומה ומעשר מקום אחר, which is, in one hand is a total tevel, in a way it's a perforated part, but they said you do not have from that truma any additional. So here is the idea. Biblically speaking, midoraita, it is a truma. Rabbinic, it's a question. Now you can go in both ways, because in one hand it's still tevel, because it's a combination of two. In one hand it's truma, they have some level of contribution, but since it's a combination, those produce that needs to divided the separated truma by biblical term, it was made by those produce that not obligated by the biblical law, so it's not considering truma by the biblical term, as long as it's not add the other part, which is truma and maaser. So the Gemara said, Shane hacha, again we're talking by force of circumstance, not the way we wish to, dim de oraita truba me al yatahi ked Rabbi Ilai. Now we turning in different direction. And as we remember, the Tosfot in the previous page asked a question: if a person combined the two, what do I mean by that? You have a rotten fruits, you have a good quality one, and the person combined the two, that's a violation, even it's accepted. So imagine a situation, someone comes to Steve in the kitchen and he brings a donation. He brings a big pot of, let's say, produce. And all of a sudden when Steve opened it, he realized that part of that, it's a rotten product. Now, this is a contribution, right? So the question is, if the person had intent to have it as a tithe, as a contribution, and is a combination of something that it's not befitting for consumption or nothing befitting to be a proper contribution, how you treat it. So here Rabbi Eli came in and he said, even you don't put a tithe, didn't have the Truma and Maaser, the Kohen can use it. Can use it in a sense. You cannot compare someone who's combined a perforated part with a non-perforated part, that biblically speaking that tightening is not in effect, versus, and the Kohen cannot take part, Rashi said, as long as not make it Truma, versus here in the opposite way, which is from something that is non-perforated with this something that perforated, we are more lenient. But the Rabbi Eli, here is the source. Rabbi Eli said, מניין לתורם מן הרעה ליפה שתרומתו תרומה. From where we derive with regard to one who separates truma from poor quality produce for superior quality produce, that his truma, his contribution is considering truma. Again, it's not the highest level of contribution, but it's still a contribution. Again, as we see, we have a level of gradation when it's come to this. Dichtiv, the Torah said a very interesting sentence. They said in the book of Bamidbar, book of Numbers, chapter 18, verse 32, ולא תישאו עליו חטא, בהרימכם את חלבו ממנו, and you shall bear no sin by reason of it, seeing that you have set apart from it its best. So what do you see from this verse? That if one separated truma from inferior quality produce, he has committed a sin, which shows that his action is effective. Rabbi Eli proceeds to explain. So in one hand, we accept it, but he carries a sin. Again, remember the story we said at the very beginning with Cain and Abel, that when God approached Cain and he said, why you're mad that they not accepted your offering? If you bring a proper offering, I'll accept that. So in that sense, if you bring just the rotten product, it's for sure a sin. But if you combine the bad with the good, it's accepted biblically speaking, but by the same token it's considering a sin. Ve'im ein kadosh nesiut chet lama. So here Rabbi Eli elaborates and he said, and if this inferior portion is not sanctified as a truma, as a contribution at all, why is there a bearing of sin? If the produce does not have the status of truma, he has not done anything, which means that his action cannot be considered as a sin. So, why do we call him a sin? The Rashbam in Bava Batra 84 explained, again, it's all depend upon the intention. Let's face it, you go to the shuk, I know as an Israeli, go to a shuk. One of the things that you have to be careful, sometimes you see a tomatoes or cucumbers, looks awesome, but if you dig in, you see the rotten, it's below than the nice one that appear on the surface. So here, מכאן לתורם מן הרעה אל היפה, שתרומתו תרומה. From here we learn that with regard to one who's separated from the bad for the good, that his contribution, his truma, is considered after the fact, b'diavad, not lechatchila. Similarly, the truma of one who separates ritually impure food with pure food, it's valid by truma by Torah law. So you have these two atzitzim, two perforated one. One is the biblical, one is rabbinic. It's tevel, so because he's mafrish, is divided from something chiyuv al ptur. And efshar, you cannot frish tevel. Rashi said, shaneacha. I'm just reading quickly part of the Rashi, just the vignette of that. Rashi said, בטמא וטהור דמדאורייתא תרומה מעלייתא היא, אבל מן נקוב על שאין נקוב אבל מהחיוב על הפטור, וכיוון דפטור כמפריש לא חי אלא לשם תרומה, ילקח תבל הוא, ואסור אף לכהן, ורבננו דגזר למטבע לכהן, הואיל וקרא להם שם תרומה. So again, Reb Chaim Brisk asked a question. The Gemara said in the Tractate Yevamot, כל מילתא דאמר רחמנא יעביד מהנה, למה לא כן? So if someone violated עבר מימרה של התורה, he violated Torah. עשית מעשה אסור, he did something that it's not, so he deserved מלכות. So here you see why the Gemara said that לא תאכול תרומה רעה על היפה. נשיאות חטא למה לי. So Chaim explained there's a two component when someone combines something bad with something good. One is the idea, as we said earlier. The children of Israel divided the land, the 12 tribes. We talk first the early stage, okay? The people who Kohanim, who serve us in the temple, they make a living. Their survival is from our contributions. We, the moment we give something that it's inappropriate, it's a rotten fruit to him, so it is just not proper to bring a truma, to bring contribution, something like that. Or because you basically cause him to lose, meaning the Kohen expecting you to bringing a proper food and you brought him something that it's not. So the question is, what exactly involved here? What's the problem? So if you say that not because you brought something bad, but because you're obligated to bring something good, so that's the idea of chalot. Reb Chaim said that, Reb Chaim Brisk said, lo avar meimra derachmana. So that's the reason why it's chal. The big question is, you said in one hand that it's considered a truma, on the other hand, you said that he's a sinner. That's the struggle with this line. And for sure we all talking about after the fact. אמר לרבה לרב חיסדא לדידך דאמרת לו עשה ולא כלום לא עיקר דאפילו האוגבירא דהדר לטיב למה הייתמה גזירה דילמה פשע ולא מפריש, as we said in the early part, מאיכא מידי דמדאורייתא הווה תרומה ומשום דילמה דפשע פקוע רבנן לחולין וכי בדין מתנין לעקור דבר מן התורה. Here we start a new סוגיה, a new subject, and the subject is how far the power of the rabbis. How was Rashi promised us in the previous part? He said, is the Bet Din, is rabbinic court, has the power to go ahead and stipulate and enact a decree and uproot something that applies by Torah law. So he said, we are Jewish, so sometimes we answer question with the question. So you have in the Torah, in Deuteronomy 17, we have to do what the rabbis tells us in every generation, meaning the Torah is not in heaven in the sense that every generation there are leaders and we have to follow them, and the people of the Sanhedrin, the sages, are the people who sometimes need to do it and overrules the Torah laws. Amar lei ve'at lo tizbera ve'atnan havlad mamzer mizeh u'mizeh. We talk here about issue of legitimacy of child. Again, go back to the original situation, which is a woman, married woman, the husband left, for example, there's a conflict between them, or he went to Afghanistan, went to Panama, went to Amazonas, you don't know where is he. Someone came back and said he's dead. So result of one person, makes no difference if he's Jewish or not, man or woman, come before us and say that he's dead. We take it, we want to release this deserted wife. She may be alone for years or who knows how long. We let her marry, and then she married to a second man, and it turns that the original husband come back, and it's very painful because she was pregnant, she have a baby. So we said avlad mamzer mizeh u'mizeh. So for example, if it's during the period of time, let's say less than 9 months from the departing of the first husband, and you have a question, this is pre-DNA, so you said that the child is illegitimate from both. So in one hand, you said that it's lechumra, which means this baby this child is illegitimate, so he cannot marry a regular bat Israel. On the other hand, is kula, is lenient, because he can marry another illegitimate child. So bishlama misheni mamzer. I understand why the second husband is not considering a valid marriage, and therefore the child that come out of that union is not legitimate. Ela mirishon amai. Why you say that the child that come out of the first husband is not legitimate? Ishtohi v'Yisrael me'aliyahu. This is his wife, and since this is his wife, by the Torah law, their son is a full-fledged Jew. So, and the sage's declaration that he is mamzer cannot be seen as mere stringency. The kasharina lay bemamzeret, and thereby permit him to a mamzeret. So this shows that the rabbinical decree can uproot a Torah prohibition. So the Torah said in Deuteronomy 23 verse 3 that regular Israel cannot marry mamzeret, but mamzer, someone who's illegitimate, can marry mamzer. That's Mishnah in Kiddushin, page 69. So here you see a proof from this Mishnah that the sages can uproot a biblical law. Amar lei Rabbah respond to Rav Chizda, and he said, Hache Amar Shmuel, Asur b'mamzeret, the child from the first husband, even that we treat him as mamzer, cannot marry mamzeret. V'chen ata Ravin, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Asur b'mamzeret, v'mai kara לממזר, לאוסרו בבת ישראל. The only reason that we give him a title of mamzer is that the sages stringent and render it prohibition for him to marry a regular Jewish woman, which means with regard to the issue of at hand, as he may not marry a mamzeret, the sages did not in fact uproot the mitzvah that applies by Torah law. So it means it's only lechumra, but not lekula, not lineage, because they not uprooted Torah law. So it means they don't say, the sages do not say that this is total illegitimate child, and they only in a certain manner that it's called knas, it's some type of fine. So now Rav Chizda go in different direction. We want to prove that the rabbis can uproot the biblical terms. Here is another example. שלח לרב חיסדא לרבא ביד רב אחא בר אבונה, ואין בדין מתנין לעקור דבר מן התורה והתניא. Here is another scenario. ממתי אדם יורש את אשתו קטנה? In those days they marry children very young age. So if you marry a girl that her father passed away, she's an orphan, and the mother or the brother marry her to someone. So the question is, now you have a union of husband and wife, while the wife is still a little child, a baby. So Beit Shammai אומרים, משתעמוד בקומתה. Beit Shammai said she needs to stand in a sense that she is fully developed height, which means when she grows up and reaches the age of maturity. Now you see here a disputation between Rashi and Tosfot, because literally speaking, Beit Shammai hold that she needs to be 12 years and have some maturity. Rashi said, כשתגיע לפרקה בשנים ובבאת שיער, she needs to reach an age of years and having hair. Tosfot said, משתעמוד בקומתה היינו שנראית גדולה. So it means that the big question is, what do you mean by maturity? That's based on a different disputation earlier between Rashi and Tosfot. Why you need at the first place to see her reaching that age of maturity? According to Rashi, Beit Shammai have an issue. Issue is maybe she have the time of mi'un, which means if potentially she was alive and she was refused to that marriage. As you know, if you marry a girl below than the proper age, she have the right to refuse when she grew up. So you have to differentiate between according to Beit Shammai, between the years, between the simanim. So now here we talk about the inheritance. So it's only rabbinic idea that they have some notion of inheritance, because other Rishonim hold why you don't use the term gdola at the first place? Tosfot said, be realistic. You take a little child from a kindergarten. So it's a chucha v'itlula. It's people don't take it seriously, even in those years that they marry very young, because it looks like a father and a daughter. So you need to show that she is growing up a person in order to make those decisions. But they אומרים שתיכנס לחופה. But they אומרים that only when she reaches age of maturity, she is under the chuppah, which means that the total marriage. Rabbi Eliezer אומר משתיבעל, when they have an act of cohabitation. ויורשה ומתעמלה ואוכלת בגינו תרומה. Can go and have the right of a hair. If it's a kohen, he can contaminate to her because she's a part of the 7 immediate family, and she can eat with truma because of him. בית שמאי אומרים, מי שתעמוד בקומתה, as we said, אף על גב דלא נכנסו לחופה. So Tosfot explained to us, according to Bet Hillel, she's entered the chuppah even before she reached the komata, because otherwise you cannot do it without chuppah. So the Gemara elaborates and said, אימה מי שתעמוד לקומתה ותיכנס לחופה. So it means even she entered the chuppah when she was a little child, it's still an effect, because later on she can, since she have the right for refusal, so that's already have some pre-set up an effect. Even she was early part of premature stage. והרי כאמרו לבית שמאי לבית הלל, דקה אמריתו משתיכנס לחופה, היא עמדה בקומתה מהניה לחופה, והיא לא מהניה חופה. So Tosfot elaborate on that. I wish to have more time. Let's continue. Rabbi Eliezer אומר, מי שתיבעל. Rabbi Eliezer said no, you have to have it from only time that they have a real cohabitation, sexual relations. ואמר רבי אליעזר, אין מעשה קטנה כלום. Rabbi Eliezer said in page 107b that the action of a minor girl is nothing, which indicates that marriage and intercourse with her are not considered an act of acquisition. Rather, he said, we must say that he meant from when she matures and has a normal relations. So you see here the right of a husband, if the wife is a minor, according to Beit Hillel, it's happened when they have the chuppah. And according to Beit Shammai, only if she reach maturity and have the chuppah. According to Rabbi Eliezer, only when they have the cohabitation, then you can exercise that right. Ktane miyat, we learn in the Braita, Yorsha, Veha hacha midoraita avuha yareitla. So here you see by the Torah law that her father, which means her relatives, as he's dead, inherits from her, as a minor orphan cannot marry by Torah law. So I explain in my book, Rashi said here, Klomar Krovei Arav Yartela de Nisue Ktana Midrabanan Ninhu. The Rashi have an issue here, when you talk about minors, when the father have the right to marry her. But here Rashi wants to tell us that it doesn't mean that the father himself inherits, but because of his right of inheritance, then after his passing, other relatives can do it. So they said, because she's total minor. Here you have a Rashi, and beside of Rashi you have Tosfot, you have Maharsha, you have Rabbi Akiva Iger. He said that Rabbi Akiva Iger, for example, said that even in the time of the life of the father, you can have ma'amar because they flawed her, and when she, by rabbinic law, that's still have an effect. Rabbanan yarit labal. So again, by the idea of rabbinic law, the husband inherits from her. So it showed that the sages can uproot the Torah mitzvah. So that's clearly. So they said, Rabbi rejected that. They said, hefker bedin, hefker. The Rabbi Yitzchak meant hefker bedin, hefker. So he said that if the property declared ownerless by the rabbinic court is ownerless, and therefore the court can allocate her inheritance as they see fit. Here is the source. Shneimar, they said in the book of Ezra, Ezra was the leader that led the people from Babylon to build the second temple. So they said in the book of Ezra, chapter 10, verse 8, וכל אשר לא יבוא לשלושת הימים כעצת השרים והזקנים יוחרם כל רכושו והוא ייבדל מקהל הגולה. The Gemara and you see it in Rashi in Tractate Gittin, page 36b, that Ezra and the head of the rabbinic assembly call for all the people that come from exile to gather together for assembly for 3 days, especially those who marry out of faith. They ask them to separate themselves, and they put a fine for those who refuse to come. So the Rambam said in L'chot Sanhedrin, chapter 24, that we derive from that the power of the Bet Din to declare ownerless to some property of people when it's needed. So it's a clear indicator the court can confiscate anyone's possession. Another source, Rabbi Lazar Amar Mehacha, they said in the book of Yoshua, Joshua chapter 19, verse 51, אלה הנחלות אשר ניחלו אלעזר הכהן ויהושע בן נון וראשי אבות למטות בני ישראל. ומה עניין ראשים אצל אבות? אלא לומר לך מה אבות מנחילים בניהם כל מה שירצו. אף ראשים מנחילים כל העם כל מה שירצו. So basically you see here that when you use the term of head, that the leader and judge of people, that the leaders can take a property from one individual and give it to another. So for example, father doing his life, he can do, if it's not a will, he can do a matana michaim, he can give whatever he wish as he wish. You have here just a side note, is, for those who are more in advance, you see the Yam Shel Shlomo and Machna Ephraim have a discussion. If you say that the Hefker Bedin Hefker, that if the Bedin declare ownerless, it's taken effect, it's Siluk or Hakna'ah. So Yam Shel Shlomo said that you see here the two psukim, the two sentences. One said Yochoram, and one said Akna'ah. But if you read the Keren Orah said that the first pasuk said it's a Siyag L'Sha'ato, and the second one is also Gam Takana L'Dorot. So therefore, Hefker Bedin have Vechalot. Anyway, Umitamela, the husband can become ritually impure to her when she passed, because it's, if he's a Kohen, he allow only to the 7 immediate family. V'ahachad Midoraita Avia Mitamela. So how we come evaluate Torah law and become contaminated? Because we consider that as a met mitzvah, meaning met mitzvah, we have a met mitzvah. We need to know that the definition of a corpse that's considering a mitzvah for the Kohen to contaminate to him. Someone who passed and is no one else to take care of her, and the Kohen screamed and said, I need help to bury, and others can come and help. So the big question is, what do you mean by that? Is he himself, or if others can help? So they said, en zemet mitzvah. As long as they have other people who take care of the deceased, so he's no longer considering a met mitzvah for the Kohen, because there are other people who can take care of that. Hachanami kevan de lo yartela. So here too, since the member of her father's family do not inherit from her, she velo anula, and she would call and they would not answer her, as they have no desire to go to any trouble for her. So since her husband inherits from her, it is his duty to tend to her burial, and he must therefore perform impure for her, as she has the status of a met mitzvah. No one could do it free. The Tosfot said that according to that you see that each and every time that one not inherited, if there's nobody else to do the burial. Tosfot said that you see here the Rabbanan Okrim, the rabbis uprooted something very biblical, because you see here that he used the term, the Tosfot in the previous page, it said, so it means, Tosfot explained that if it makes sense, the rabbis can go ahead and do that. So just let's finish this shiur, just a few lines, page 90. So she eat truma on his account. So how come you say it? So it said b'truma de Rabbanan. It said rabbinic law, not by Torah law. So it's not the rabbinic law, so it's not considering akirat isur madrah. It's not uprooted a biblical law.